You found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we look at insider threats. Everyone's so focused on ransomware and external attacks, but what about the person sitting right next to you? You know, the one with admin privilege who just got passed over for a promotion. Or that contractor in another country who just got offered 6 months' salary to copy some files. We break down the 3 types of insider threats: the malicious actor, the careless employee, and the compromised insider. I share some war stories from consulting. Prasanna brings up some recent cases like the Coinbase and Apple breaches. I hope you enjoy it. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years, ever since I had to tell my boss that there were no backups of the production database that we had just lost. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Welcome to the show. Hi, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I have with me a guy who's really good at asking questions, but not necessarily when I need them asked. Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going, Prasanna?
I'm good, Curtis. I do ask a lot of questions. It's not my fault because usually when we're having these conversations, you're in the middle of something, and I'm in the middle of
That's
something,
the problem.
right?
We're both in the middle of something. You go, have you thought about the XYZ parameter? And I'm like, that's a really good thing. Like, I'm driving, you're working. One of us should probably write that down.
Yeah. No. We do write it down.
Like,
we do.
what?
We text it, but then the problem is it gets lost in all the text.
Well,
and
it would help if we didn't text each other like 157 times a day.
I think it's actually 158, but yes.
Yeah. So now I'm like, dude, I need the questions. And what did you give? You were like, structure. Give me structure. Give me a document to write it in, because I'm so good at structure. Everybody knows. Anybody that knows anything about me knows structure.
Well, and literally all you had to do was create a blank document in Google Docs and just add and share it with me. That's all you had to do. You didn't have to put any content, nothing.
It took so long to do that, Prasanna. It was so long. So much effort.
Oh, Curtis.
Anyway,
but
we're going to talk about one of my
Wait, but before we go on, so I think one of the problems you're going to find though is, like, you know, like in my conversations, I ask a question, then a follow up, then another follow up, then another follow up. It's like I don't always have everything up front, so I think the document might turn into that. So you might need to comment and respond or chat live about the questions, so then we can get to the next level of questions.
Use Google Meet? Is that what you want me to do?
No, I'm just saying use it over the phone, call, and we'll have to go over the questions because it might spawn additional questions.
Spawn. That was a movie. Did you ever see that, Spawn?
I did not see the movie.
It was a graphic novel and then turned into a movie. I literally don't remember anything about the movie other than that there was a creature.
It's also what they do in video games when, like, you spawn somewhere, like you
respawn. Yeah. So this week we're going to talk about something that comes up a lot, and there are some people, you know, there's a term that comes up a lot called rogue admin, which is sort of a subset of this topic that we're going to talk about. And there's some people that think that that's a boogeyman and that doesn't really exist. What we're talking about is insider threats. And I think it's something that people should be concerned with. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think the big thing with the insider threat, like, these are people you are trusting to do something for your company, right? You've hired them, right? They have a job, they have a responsibility. Maybe they're managing your IT infrastructure or your application, but at a flip of a switch, they could do something that exposes your company and could potentially cause it irreparable financial harm.
Yeah, either accidentally or, I was about to say on purposely. Intentionally. Either accidentally or intentionally, right?
Yeah. And actually, since you did talk about the accidentally or intentionally, I think one thing that before this call you were talking about is sort of like the three types of insider threats
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
exist. Do you want to kind of go over those?
Yeah. So there are three types of insider threats. One is like an actual person that is um, actually looking to do harm to your organization, right? And then the second is the the careless person, or the person that isn't following policy or isn't concerned about security, and they do things that could create the third type of insider threat, which is technically not an insider, but it's an insider that has been compromised
Yeah.
because they downloaded the wrong piece of software. They put their password on a sticky note. They got on a Zoom call and the sticky note is in the background.
Yeah.
um, all that sort of stuff. Those are sort of the
Yeah.
three types that we'll talk about.
Yeah. And just quickly on that too, I know a lot of times when I mention it too, right? It's insider, we normally think about, oh, it's an employee of the company. But
Right.
remember, it might be a partner, it might be a service provider you're using, it might be a contractor, right? It might not
Yeah.
even be someone in tech.
I think when most people think about the insider threat, they think about the first category, which is an actual insider. And it could be an employee, a partner, a contractor, but someone that you have given insider access to your company, right?
Yep.
And I do think that there was a lecture I saw one day. It was actually about the merger of Cray and SGI.
Hmm.
Um, and the person was a cybersecurity person, and he was describing the cybersecurity, what would you call it, the MO of each organization. And he described one, and I honestly to this day I don't remember which one was which. One he described as a hard crunchy interior with a soft gooey exterior, and the other was a hard crunchy exterior with a soft chewy interior. And I think most companies are the latter.
Perimeter
They have
defenses.
perimeter defenses, but once you're inside, that's it, and all bets
Mm.
are off, right?
So,
I can think of one company that I worked with that was the former, and it was because the type of data that they had was so sensitive. They were very concerned about insider threats, and so it wasn't assumed that once you were in, you were
yeah.
okay. You needed to you needed specific access to access different resources, not just from a identity, and like that, but also like where you were and what you were doing. Only then would you
Was
get
this
access to the
was
right
this the same
services.
company that basically did not let you do backups because backups needed to touch everything in the environment, and they were like, "Nope."
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a slight mischaracterization of that company. There was a group that didn't want to give me access to everything, and somebody had to like, hey, Curtis is doing the thing, right?
Yeah.
Leave Curtis alone. We'll figure it out when the project is done. Once everything has access to everything, then we'll figure out how to sort of lock it down.
Yeah.
But Curtis has a big enough project enough to do. I worked on that project 95 hours a week
Yeah.
for close to a year.
Yeah.
And it was so difficult that it was actually local here,
Mm.
but it was like 45 minutes away. The company got me a corporate apartment nearby, so that I could get 4 hours of
Almost
sleep a
sleep.
night. Um,
Crazy. So
yeah,
on this topic though, right, of the sort of the malicious insider, right?
yeah,
Um, one, I don't know if you remember this case, Curtis, but there was the scenario. Actually, there are two that I'm thinking of, and I don't know if one of them kind of bleeds over. Remember there was a company called Unify, which I use their networking gear,
yeah.
right? And they're a public listed networking company. And they had a whistleblower who came up and said, "Hey, by the way, this company got attacked and all these credentials got leaked." And it turns out he was actually an employee who had stolen the credentials of the company and had faked the entire attack,
Yes, I do remember that
right?
story. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And the only way they were able to prove it was him was because they went and they looked back at all the data and they were like, yeah, this is actually his data. And I think he had set up like VPNs to download the data. And turns out that,
And they,
uh,
yeah, they correlated like his VPN login to the attack times
Yeah.
and all of that. I do remember that
Yeah.
attack. Yeah. And that is a true like number one insider threat.
Yeah.
I think of another, probably the most infamous one that I can think of, and I believe the name was Roger Duranio. Uh, I, I I I might have the
FBI
last name
agent.
slightly wrong. No, no, he was a guy that he didn't like his bonus or he got let go or something like that. And so to find the story, you Google logic bomb. That was the
Oh,
phrase that they used. He basically set off a logic bomb, is what they called it, which basically deleted everything, right? And which included like some of the backups and things like
oh.
that. And
If his access or his username didn't exist or something like that, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it just blew up the whole place. That
Yeah.
that was the first really big one that I remember. He was caught, he was prosecuted, um, but I think a lot of these are not caught. They're not
Yeah.
prosecuted, and when we think about this type of insider threat, like some people might just throw their hands up and go, "Well, what am I supposed to do? They're inside. What
Yeah.
can somebody do to stop this type of insider threat?"
And this is like a lot of what we talk about, right? It's like, okay, do you at least have the logging and monitoring in place to be able to capture some of these? And are you using proactive security tools to actually flag for anomalies? Like, hey, this person is accessing resources they normally don't, or this person is downloading 20 gig files. Is that normal?
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. From a security perspective, right? And then I think from a backup perspective, I'm sure you have some ideas around this.
Well, I was going to add to the security perspective. This is why we talk about the concept of least privilege, because the idea is just give the person, each person, the power that they need to do their job, but only their job.
Yep.
It's probably the hardest part about proactive cybersecurity, right? Because it's so much easier to just give people like you and me all power, right? You've got root everywhere, and another good story, and this is another local company. Happens to be a clothing company, and I remember being sent there to install. I'm pretty sure it was Net Backup. I was there to install Net Backup, and the guy walks in, and he's like, the password for all of those servers is Elvis, and the password for all these servers is Apollo. See you later. And he just left. Right. It was the root password, right, that he was giving me. And then and he just handed me the keys to the kingdom with no monitoring, and I'm logging in directly as root because I'm at the console, so I can do that. And then at some point, some other guy walked in and was like, "Who are you?" Like he sees me sitting there at the server
Yeah.
with a root prompt. He's like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "I'm the guy doing the thing." He's like, "Is nobody watching you? Is nobody? What are you?" Huh? And he like ran out, and it was like a whole thing. But yeah. So that's that's what not to do. By
Yeah.
the way, that's another thing that's important to do with the concept of least privilege, right? Is you never log in as root, as
Mhm.
administrator. You log in and you become that, and that way, and you can establish that both through policy and through technology. You can say it's just sometimes it's difficult to completely eliminate it, but you can say you can only log in as root or administrator on the console, for
Yeah.
example. You should never be logging in as root or administrator, directly. You should be, SUing to it or sudoing. And even then, you should be like, especially in Linux and Unix, you should be using sudo whenever possible to do the thing, and
Yeah.
don't just run sudo sh. Right?
Yep.
And now you have a
Exactly.
root prompt, and then you do the thing, and then you get out. The best practice would be to, again, you can establish this through policy, as you can say, when you're doing things that require root, do this,
Yeah.
right? And you should try to limit the number of things that require root, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing to also mention, I know with this topic we're discussing mainly around like people accessing infrastructure, deleting infrastructure, but as part of insider threat, you also have to think about people exfiltrating data, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that's one thing. So I think just earlier this week, I read an article where Apple was suing a former employee who had worked on the Vision Pro glasses and
Oh,
had left and joined Snap.
mm.
And basically, before he had
Oh,
left,
snap! Sorry, I just came to me.
either Snap or Meta's glasses, I don't know, one of those similar sort of companies. And before he left, he basically didn't say where he's going. He gave 2 weeks' notice. And then he started downloading a bunch of documents onto USB
Yeah,
drives and walking out with it. And so Apple sued to basically say, you stole our IP, which is critical, right? When you're trying to be
yeah,
competitive,
yeah, yeah.
right? And so that's another thing to also think about from insider threat
Yes,
is it's also the
exfiltration.
exfiltration.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that's why you monitor things. That's why and when you have something like that where you have an employee or contractor that leaves, you should have an offboarding process that includes looking at their accounts, looking at their hardware that they have, and then doing forensic, especially anybody that you think that you in any way suspect, right? You can
Yeah.
do forensic,
For it.
you could do digital forensics against that laptop or any other device, and you would be amazed at the kinds of things that you can uncover by having a digital forensics
Yeah.
offboarding process.
But it was
Um,
interesting though, because I was reading the article and they were saying whatever the guy did and whatever Apple's policies are, they're like, we couldn't fully determine what he actually stole
yeah, yeah, that's
because they
probably
had
true,
sort of
right?
covered his tracks.
Yeah, yeah. From a backup perspective, really, it's the big thing is applying to two things come to mind. One is applying the concept of least privilege to the backups, and I think we talked about this in the past. We could have we should have a whole other episode about how to do that. And then the other thing that comes to mind is again immutable, 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 immutable. That no matter how much power someone has, they shouldn't be able to prematurely
You're struggling with words today, Curtis.
they shouldn't be able to prematurely, that's weird, I don't know why it's a struggle today, delete backups prior to their expiration date. And the yeah, and so that's where true immutability comes into play.
Yeah.
So let's talk about
Wait,
the
you
second.
forgot
Go ahead.
you forgot
What?
one, which I'm quite surprised.
What, the 3-2-1 rule?
No,
Oh, what
Four
did I
Eyes.
forget? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that falls under the basically the whole least privilege thing. But yeah, another thing you could do with backups is this thing called 4 eyes or MPA, multi-person authentication, and that's where if you're doing these things, which are dangerous, things like reducing the retention on backups, deleting policy configurations, maybe prematurely expiring backups, right? Whatever it is, if you're doing any of these things, it requires a second person authentication, and often referred to as 4 eyes. Yeah, good point. Good point. So let's talk about the second person, and this is
Second per oh, wait.
the second type of insider
Okay, thank you.
threat, which is this um, lackadaisical, lazy, maybe a person who just doesn't care, or maybe let's just face it, maybe they're just dumb. Maybe they shouldn't be in IT, or that they shouldn't have privileges
Yeah.
that can do damage, right? And we've talked about this is where the thing that comes to mind here is like know before, right?
Mhm.
This idea of a company that you use to test the cyber intelligence of your team, right? And I'm a big fan of that. I don't want to necessarily endorse know before. I'm sure they have competitors,
Mhm.
but they're the ones that I know of the most. We used them at a previous employer, and I do want to make the point though that if you identify someone who um, is not doing the right things, it's not about publicly shaming that person, right? It's about identifying the weakness and doing education. Now, if you
Edu
identify the weakness, you do the education, and then nothing sticks, right? Um, at some point, I don't think you should be considering like punitive things, right? Having said that, at some point, if a person repeatedly drinks acid, perhaps they shouldn't be in the department that produces acid.
Yeah. It's like the risk profile, right?
Yeah, the risk profile. If they continue to show being a high risk person, which is what things like Know Before do, then perhaps it's time to move them to a less secure role.
Role. Yeah. I agree with
Yeah,
that. And I think that's something that's probably easy for many companies to onboard. Like most companies have like, hey, here's your standard cybersecurity policy, training. You should be doing this like once a year and refresh basically once a year. Right. That way everyone sort of has like a bare minimum.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And
Because
I do believe in very frequent,
yeah.
like rather than one giant training once a year. I believe in like monthly or quarterly smaller amounts of training, because what you're really trying to do is you're really trying to keep it forefront, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to keep that in mind. Like, listen, you have power, you have abilities to do things. We're not concerned so much about you, but about someone who might become you,
Yeah.
right? And do bad things, right?
And also the testing, like I like with Know Before, right? It sends out fake emails,
Yeah.
right? To get you to try to click and try to phish users. And then they're like, hey, you did something wrong. Let's go do some additional training to help you understand what you should be doing.
Yeah. And I do believe in some type of reward given to people who identify the fake emails and then report them,
Yeah.
right? I'm a much bigger fan of the carrot over the stick,
Yeah.
right? And I think I do remember this was somebody that came on the pod where they said that the company had sent out a
Flowers
notification that the flowers, yeah, on Valentine's
on
Day.
Valentine's Day, that the flowers were delivered or at the front desk
Click
for the
here to claim your
person.
flowers or
Yeah.
something.
And then I think they had said that I think it was a woman who received flowers and she like blew it off because she's like, my husband won't send me flowers or something like that, right?
Yeah. Oh, it was the person was a cyber person,
Yeah, yeah,
and the wife was somewhat
yeah, yeah.
knowledgeable in cyber stuff, and she's like, my husband would never send me flowers. And I remember this. I remember saying that for a few minutes, everybody thought that they were loved.
Yep.
That was a little cruel, I think,
Eh,
but I like this idea of constantly testing and and stuff
yeah,
and using the carrot and not the stick. But and so the third category is really the first category. It's just that basically how to respond to it is kind of mostly the same. And that the third category being you now have an insider that isn't an insider. You have someone who has used some of the techniques like phishing, social engineering. By the way, social engineering, my favorite reference. And so again, go watch Sneakers, please. If you haven't
yep.
watched Sneakers, I love that movie. First off, it's just a good time, and it's got so many stars in there.
Yeah.
And although there's some tech that's like, okay, come on, like the magic box that can unencrypt everything, sure, we'll let that go. But there's the scenes that they do there on social engineering, and I'm thinking about the scene with Robert Redford where he's got like it's supposed to be like a box of cake and like balloons, and he's
Mm.
supposed to be let in. He's like, oh,
Oh
I
yeah.
can't, I can't do the thing. I can't reach my badge. Can you buzz me in? And the guy buzzes him right in,
Yeah.
right? Probably doesn't hurt that he looks like Robert Redford,
Yeah.
but again, remember, I know a guy
Yeah.
that does physical penetration testing, and he said he has never not gotten into a place.
No.
His job is to get into a place that he's not supposed to get into, take a photo, and then get the hell out before he gets shot. Literally, okay. And he said he's always gotten in.
Yeah.
Social engineering is an incredibly powerful thing, right? People want to be nice, they want to be helpful,
Yeah.
et cetera.
So there's an article I recently read in the news about this third type of insider threat. So
Mm-hmm.
Coinbase,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know, they had a data breach recently.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns, and I don't remember how many tens of thousands of account data got leaked. It turns out that what had happened is bad actors had bribed a contracting firm in India who Coinbase outsources to, and that Indian contracting firm basically handed over account information from Coinbase to these bad actors.
So I'm not allowed to make any Indian jokes, right?
No. It doesn't have to be
Um,
Indian. It could be it could be a
it
contractor anywhere, right? But
could be.
everyone's always
Yeah.
open to a certain value, right?
Everyone is
Has a price.
definitely, everyone has a price.
Yeah.
And the I do think that, again, not against India, but there are a number of countries, India, Philippines, not sure where else people do this kind of thing, but what's happening is there's an economic disparity
Mhm.
between us and this other country, and that's why we're there, right? And I just think you should take that into consideration when you're thinking about, again, going back to least privilege. Give them the ability to do what they need to do, but realize that there is an economic disparity, which would, I think, make them, when I say easier to bribe, it's not that they're personally easier to
Yeah.
bribe. It's the amount of money. Like if I offer them $1,000,000, that's a lot more.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even have to offer them $1,000,000. I can offer them 100,000, and it means so much more to them
Yeah.
than whatever. So
Trying to.
I
Yeah.
think it's something that you should take into account,
Yeah.
right?
And this is where I think it's important to vet your contractors, your third parties, right? Even on an ongoing basis to make sure, do they have policies in place? Are they also doing the same sort of monitoring and auditing that you do
Yeah,
to be able to catch these sort of things? Because you are giving them access to your systems and your
yeah.
customer data, right? So
There's also there's the famous Target story as well, where Target was breached because of a device
mm,
that was connected to their air conditioning system. That's what I remember, and it basically was traced back to poor cybersecurity practices on the part of the the HVAC system. Yeah. So you're only as strong as your weakest link, and your links. Everyone, you're only as strong as your weakest link. One of your links includes every one of your suppliers.
remember, we talked to someone who was doing penetration testing. They needed to break into a company. They tried going through their networks. They couldn't get in. And then they ended up realizing in their lobby they had a TV of a certain brand. So they went and bought it from the local store. And then they found a vulnerability on it. And then they basically got into the company through their TV.
Yeah, that was Dwayne LaFlotte, and that was a great. I loved his story. I loved. We should link to that whole episode here. That, like, if you haven't seen or listened to that episode, you really should. And one of my favorite parts that he goes into there is how much he loves the backup system from a red teaming perspective. Right? Again, red teaming is the sort of proactive defense, or proactively attacking a company for the purposes of looking for vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to the blue team, which is the defense team,
Yeah.
which is our friend Mike Saylor, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, we need to have Dwayne back on. I'm sure he's got more stories.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so again, the second group of the the lame people creates the third group, which essentially becomes the first group.
Yep.
Right. And so this is why, again, going back, this is why that, yes, you need to do all the things, you need to do the monitoring, but you also need to do this concept of least privilege and just limiting what an individual person can do. Right.
Yeah.
And, the HVAC controller should be able to send controls reports of how cold it is, and that's it. It shouldn't be able to log into a server, right?
Yep.
That's that's exactly the kind of thing we're talking about here. Limiting, and our former employer was really good at that with the cloud design, where it's like their S3 buckets could only be talked to by the systems that did the backups, right? So
Yeah.
even though it's S3, and technically you can get to that from anywhere, but they had configured it so that only their systems could write to it, right? So,
Yeah.
so even if the what would you call it, the credentials to access an S3 account got compromised, you wouldn't actually be able to get to them, right? To get to it. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about, is locking down as much as you can. Again, it's so hard,
Yep.
right? Responding to the insider threat is probably the biggest challenge that you have, right? And I do just want to throw out a couple of stats here. There was this great report from Gurucul. I don't know how to pronounce that. GURUCUL.com. They had their 2024 insider threat, which, by the way, gave us the whole idea to do this episode. And they showed that in 2024, so in 2023, only 40% of companies responding said that they had no insider attacks, right?
That they knew of.
That they knew of, yeah. That number in 2024 went down to 17%, right? So basically 83% felt that they had some kind of insider attack, right? They also described that the insider attacks are more difficult to respond to, right? They're more costly, they take more time. According to this, another interesting, so basically they said 45% felt that it took a week or longer to recover from an insider attack. I thought that was, by the way, they said 55% within one day. And I'm like, really?
So I know on the podcast, we talk a lot about natural disasters and ransomware and ransomware recovery, right? Would you say that insider threats are sort of like the next, not necessarily the next wave, but like the things that are kind of like important, but people aren't necessarily thinking about or don't have a full plan in place, because it's much harder to, like you said, to protect against than say like ransomware attacks or other things where there are like certain best practices that people have, and just it hasn't matured in the insider threat side of things.
Well, I think that there's like a Venn diagram between malware attacks and insider threats, right? And it's not a circle, but there's a huge, like 80%, I think, what's overlap. And a lot of the things that we're doing to be able to detect and respond to ransomware attacks will also be able to detect and respond to an insider threat. But I do think that more people need to specifically be doing looking at design considerations that would help mitigate specifically an insider attack, right? So much of everything in the cyber world, it's just like backups. Backups are no good if you didn't make them before you need them, right? Cyber defense is no good unless you do it before you need it. Like if you do this beforehand, it makes the attack much less likely, and it also makes the attack less damaging. You minimize the blast radius.
Yeah. I was also thinking some of the conversations we'd had with Mike, right? It's like maybe you should be considering insider threat as part of your tabletop exercises and walking through that and not just focused on sort of like the ransomware side of things or other things like that.
Absolutely. Insider threat, I was going to say
the silent killer.
The silent but deadly. Wait, that's something else. No, I definitely think more, given that a significant portion of cyber attacks are from an insider threat. I believe that particular report gave 83% as a stat. I don't think enough attention is paid to the insider threat concern.
Yep. And just going back to sort of that Apple example, right? There is intellectual property claims which might be worth billions of dollars that are at stake, right? If you don't handle the insider threat.
Yeah. By the way, another movie that really gets into the concept of an insider threat and social engineering is a somewhat maligned movie called Takedown from 2000. And it stars Skeet Ulrich, and it's the somewhat fictionalized story of Kevin Mitnick, who is, he was a black hat, what we used to call a black hat hacker that he was FBI's most wanted for a while. He got prosecuted, and he turned good guy towards the end. I should mention, not everybody in the cyber world was a fan of Kevin. He's no longer with us, but he had some issues with, like, allegedly, like, taking credit for other people's work, stuff like that. But it's another movie that you can watch and get some stuff. And one of the things that I have in there, by the way, the real thing happened against DEC, right? Digital Equipment Corporation. Yeah. And in the movie, I believe they refer to them as Binary Equipment Corporation. It's sort of like in, what's the show?
Mr. Robot. Evil Corp.
Yeah, Mr. Robot. They talk about, what do
Evil
they call
Corp.
it? They call it Steel Mountain instead of...
Oh, yeah. Yep, Steel Mountain.
Instead of Iron Mountain.
Yep.
Yeah, so one of the things that he did was he called in to a person and said, "Hey, do you guys have the patch? Has a guy been by to put on the patch?" And they're like, "No." And he goes, "Oh man, it's really important. We got to put in this patch. I'm going to send my guy right away." And he sends his guy. His guy is there not to put in a patch, but to put in the malware, right? So it was like a two-tiered social engineering attack. And basically his right-hand man gets in there and puts in the back door that they then use to attack the company. Yeah. This is the problem. We got to get rid of all the people, dude. It's AI. Just
people are the problem
with AI.
To
robots,
our listeners, we are not trying to replace you and say you do not have a job anymore. Please continue to listen and support this podcast. If you like this, please go to your favorite podcatcher and subscribe, leave us a comment. We love it. You can catch us, watch our videos, and see our lovely faces on YouTube under
just
the
don't say that we look homeless. We got one comment that said we looked homeless. I'm like, really? And then he said, like, I was just joking. I'm like, okay. It's a couple of bearded guys, especially back when you had your longer beard.
Yeah.
One of us looked a little homeless. I'm just saying. Anyway. All right. Well, that's good. That thus endeth the lesson on the Insider Threat episode. That's another movie reference. So that's a reference to The Untouchables, which is the movie with Kevin Costner playing Elliot Ness taking down Al Capone, played by Robert De Niro. Anyway, thus endeth the lesson. Anyway, thanks, as always.
Anytime.
And get to my documents. Get to my
I'll get you questions. I'll add questions with more questions. How about that?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course. And thank you to you listeners. If you're still with us, thank you. And that is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links from my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.